Have you ever wondered why God lets us walk through valleys so dark that we can barely see the next step? Why He doesn't just move the mountain for us, but instead calls us to climb it, one shaky step at a time? This is Daniel's story. A man who thought God had abandoned him, until he discovered God was shaping him, the way a carpenter shapes wood, and maybe, just maybe, his story is your story too. Daniel grew up around church. He knew the prayers, he knew the songs. But life has a way of shaking the things we think we know. When he turned 30, his father passed away suddenly. The man he had always leaned on for wisdom and strength was gone. Within the same year, his small business failed. Debts piled up, and the people he thought would stand with him drifted away. He sat many nights at his kitchen table, head in his hands, whispering, "God, if you're real, where are you?" The silence hurt more than the loss. One evening, Daniel walked past an old carpentry shop. The smell of sawdust and the sound of tools reminded him of his father, who had been a carpenter. He stepped inside. An elderly craftsman looked up and smiled. "Looking for work, son?" Daniel shook his head. "No, just looking." The man said something Daniel never forgot. Wood doesn't become strong without pressure. And sometimes, the chisel is the proof that the carpenter hasn't given up on it. Daniel left confused, but deep inside, something stirred. The days ahead didn't get easier. Daniel lost his apartment, ended up sleeping in his truck for weeks. Every night he stared at the ceiling of that old vehicle, wondering if God saw him at all. It felt like a wilderness, dry, empty, endless. And just when he was most desperate, came the temptation. An old friend offered him a way to make fast money, illegal, risky, but quick. "Think about it," the friend said. "One deal, and you'll be back on your feet." Daniel almost said yes. His mind spun with thoughts. I could pay off debt. I could get a place. I could fix everything. But then, he remembered the words of the carpenter. The chisel is the proof the craftsman hasn't given up. He realized, maybe this wilderness was the chisel. Not punishment, but shaping. With tears in his eyes, he said no. And though the temptation left, the struggle didn't. One night, parked by a river, Daniel prayed out loud, "God, I don't have anything left to give. If you want me, you've got all of me, broken, empty, yours." And for the first time in a long time, he felt peace, not answers, not solutions, but peace. The next morning, Daniel walked back into that carpentry shop. Something shifted. Not on the outside, not in his bank account, not in his circumstances, but deep within. The old craftsman greeted him with a smile as though he'd been expecting him. "Glad you came back, son. There's always work for willing hands." At first, Daniel's tasks were small, sweeping sawdust into piles, stacking wood against the walls, carrying scraps out to the yard. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay much. But in those quiet, ordinary days, Daniel began to hear something, the whisper of God in the ordinary. One afternoon, the craftsman handed Daniel a piece of rough timber. The edges were jagged, splinters sticking out. "Sand it," he said. "Take your time." Hour after hour, Daniel ran the paper across the wood, back and forth, over and over. At first, it felt pointless. Nothing seemed to change. But slowly, the sharp edges softened. The rough grain turned smooth beneath his hands. Daniel realized something. Maybe this was what God was doing with him. Every trial, every lonely night, every unanswered prayer, it wasn't wasted. It was sanding. It was shaping. It was love in disguise. Soft beat. He paused, looked up at the craftsman and asked, "Does it always take this long?" The man smiled. "The finer the work, the longer it takes." Weeks turned into months. Daniel found himself drawn deeper into the rhythm of the shop. The steady sound of hammers, the hum of saws, the fragrance of fresh-cut wood. In those moments, he felt close to his father again. But more than that, he felt close to God. Every strike of the hammer seemed to echo a truth. What feels like breaking can also be building. Every cut of the saw whispered, what is being removed is making room for something new. Every polished surface reminded him, beauty comes after the sanding. One evening, Daniel stayed late. The craftsman had gone home, but Daniel remained, running his hands across the frame of a table he had been working on. He remembered his lowest nights, sleeping in his truck, tempted to take shortcuts, asking God if he'd abandoned him. And now, here he was, not rich, not famous, but different, stronger, wiser, peaceful. He whispered, Lord, maybe I needed to be broken before I could be whole. The next morning, the craftsman gave him a new challenge. Build something of your own, he said. Daniel hesitated. What if I mess it up? The old man chuckled. Mistakes are just lessons wearing work clothes. Try. So Daniel began. His hands shook at first. He measured wrong, cut too short, had to start again. But the craftsman never scolded. He simply guided, corrected, encouraged. And as Daniel learned to shape the wood, he also learned to shape his trust in God. Slowly, patiently, one cut at a time. Months later, Daniel completed his first full piece, a sturdy chair. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. The craftsman walked around it, testing its strength. Finally, he smiled. Not bad, son. Strong enough to hold someone. Those words sank deep into Daniel's heart. Strong enough to hold someone. Maybe that's what God was making him into. Not flawless, not flashy, but strong enough to hold someone else up. A friend, a family member, a stranger in need. Because when God shapes you, it's never just for you. It's so you can become a blessing to someone else. One evening, Daniel finished sanding a beautiful tabletop. The surface gleamed smooth in the golden light. Tears welled in his eyes. He prayed quietly. Father, I see it now. You weren't punishing me. You were shaping me. You never left me. You were here, in the silence, in the struggle, in the sanding. He leaned on the table, overwhelmed with gratitude. And in that still moment, Daniel felt the presence of God. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like the hands of a master carpenter. Daniel's story is a reminder for us. The wilderness is not wasted. The silence of God is not his absence. And the pressure you feel right now might just be the proof that the master carpenter is still working on you. So if you're in the valley, hold on. The chisel may hurt, but the finished work will be beautiful. Type Amen if you believe God is still shaping you.